Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with a missing drill, then a grill, then half the block realized their stuff was vanishing, quietly, cleanly, without a trace. But when one man set a trap, he uncovered a shocking truth. The thief was the last person anyone suspected, and she ran the whole damn neighborhood. It started out as one of those weeks where nothing goes quite right, but nothing goes drastically wrong either. I'd spent most of Monday elbows deep in the fuse box of a client's mountain cabin, then came home to discover that someone had knocked over my trash bins again. Typical raccoons, I figured. Tuesday evening, I was in the backyard sorting my tools when I noticed something odd. My brand new cordless drill was gone. At first, I assumed I'd left it at a job site. I even drove 20 miles back to a construction project outside Boulder to look for it. No luck. The thing had vanished. But that wasn't enough to trigger alarm bells. Tools disappear. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes you're careless. You move on. By Thursday, I was tearing through the garage like a man possessed. A box of high-end coaxial cable, the kind I use for home installations, had disappeared from the shelves. I knew exactly where it had been. Stacked neatly next to a crate of connectors under the workbench. It was gone. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. Nothing on the driveway camera. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Maybe I lent it to someone. Maybe my neighbor's kid borrowed it and forgot to mention. I sent a few texts, made a couple of polite inquiries. Everyone claimed ignorance. The kicker came Saturday morning. I went out back to fire up the grill, one of those fancy stainless steel rigs I treated myself to last summer. It had its own weather cover and sat under the patio awning, chained to the beam more out of habit than necessity. The chain was still there. The grill, gone, cleanly detached. I stood in place for a full 30 seconds, staring at the empty spot, my coffee cup cooling in my hand. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't random. This was systematic. And whoever was doing it knew how to avoid my cameras and bypass locks without leaving a trace. Naturally, I turned to the HOA chat, hoping maybe someone else had noticed something suspicious. I wasn't ready to shout thief in all caps, but I wanted to know if I was the only unlucky one. Turns out I wasn't. Within an hour, messages started rolling in. A neighbor named Lucy said her husband's power washer was missing. Joel across the street had lost a set of garden tools. Someone even claimed their kid's electric scooter disappeared off their porch. And here's what got me. Almost all the reports came from the same side of the street. Our side. The HOA president, Karen Stanford, chimed in quickly. Her tone was all business, polished, almost smug. She claimed the recent rash of disappearances was likely the result of careless storage practices and proposed new HOA regulations. No leaving tools or equipment in visible areas, mandatory lockup for outdoor items, and, get this, fines for what she called inviting theft, as if it were our fault. She even scheduled a compliance sweep for the following week to check whether properties met the new standards. That's when it clicked. While the rest of us were scratching our heads and chaining up garden rakes, Karen was already drafting punitive measures. Fast. Too fast. It felt rehearsed. It felt like someone trying to steer the conversation away from real questions. And it really started to piss me off. I refused to accept the fine she issued me for non-secured property exposure, citing the missing grill. Naturally, I emailed the HOA board requesting documentation of how the new rule had been passed, who voted for it, and when. No answer. Karen replied instead with a curt message. You'll find the guidelines in your mailbox by Monday. Non-compliance will result in escalation. The tone was threatening. The logic was broken. And I wasn't buying any of it. If someone was walking into my yard and removing expensive equipment without leaving a trace, either I had a ghost with a toolbox fetish, or someone had access, someone with keys, someone who already knew the layouts of our homes, someone like Karen Stanford who made it her job to monitor, judge, and, conveniently, penalize everyone who wasn't her. I wasn't ready to go full conspiracy theorist, but something stunk, and I wasn't about to let it slide. The ad popped up while I was drinking coffee in the garage, still fuming over the grill situation. I wasn't even looking for anything. Just scrolling through OfferUp out of habit, half watching the screen and half listening to the wind knock around a loose gutter flap. Then it stopped me cold. There it was. My inverter. My goddamn welding inverter. Same make, same year, same small crack on the side of the housing. One I remembered clearly because I'd dropped it onto a chunk of rebar back in July. The seller had posted only 3 pictures, probably thinking the angle and lighting would be enough to mask the wear. But I knew that Tool, like a parent, knows a kid's freckle pattern. And the ad didn't just list it, it had the audacity to call it like new. I clicked on the seller profile. The name was Ellie1969. No photo, no bio, and only one other listing, a leaf blower that looked suspiciously like the one Joel had mentioned losing last week. The location tag said it was about 12 miles away, in a Safeway parking lot near Parker. I didn't think twice. I texted my friend Hank. Hank used to be a county investigator, retired early after blowing out his knee during a foot pursuit. These days, he spent most of his time working on his boat and watching people argue in hardware stores. But when I explained the situation, his voice changed. He got that old gravel tone back. "Want me to pose as the buyer?" he asked. "That's exactly what I want." We set it up like a miniature sting. Hank messaged the seller through a throwaway account I'd made for him. "Looking to buy your inverter. Cash ready. Can meet tomorrow." The seller responded quickly, asked to meet at noon, and even mentioned they'd be driving a silver Ford Explorer. Something about that felt suburban. The next day, I sat in my truck across the lot parked behind a fast food place. Hank was already in position wearing sunglasses and a Broncos cap. He had his phone camera running, discreetly clipped to the strap of his satchel. At exactly 12:05, the Explorer pulled in. Clean. No bumper stickers, light tint. A woman stepped out. Middle-aged, baseball cap, dark glasses, hoodie zipped up to her chin. Even from a distance, I felt my stomach clench. She handed Hank the inverter, still in the same scuffed case I'd had since college. Hank played the part perfectly, asked a few casual questions. She was curt, barely speaking, probably nervous. When the deal was done, she got back in the SUV and left. He walked over, expression unreadable. "Recognize the car?" he asked, flipping open his notepad. "License plates from this county." I leaned over. There it was, in black ink, S5NK03. I didn't need to run it to know who it belonged to, Karen Stanford. I'd seen that plate enough times, pulling up to HOA meetings like she was arriving at a White House briefing. We didn't confront her, not yet. Hank agreed. We needed more. One stolen item could be explained away. A misunderstanding. "Oops, I bought it from a friend. Didn't know." That sort of thing. But if there were more items, if this was a pattern, we could build a case. Quietly. Thoroughly. Back home, I sat in the dark garage, inverter in my lap, every muscle in my neck tight. The edges of this thing were starting to sharpen. Whoever was behind it had keys, had confidence, had a system. And if I was right, if Karen Stanford was walking into yards and fencing gear online, then we weren't talking about HOA politics anymore. We were talking about theft, on a scale. And she had no idea that someone was about to turn the cameras on her. I didn't sleep much after that. The inverter sat on my workbench like a taunt. Every time I passed by it, I felt the pressure building, a weird mix of disbelief and adrenaline, like I'd stumbled into something bigger than I knew how to handle. But I wasn't going to rush it. If Karen really was behind this, I needed proof. Not suspicions, not coincidences. Evidence. So I decided to set a trap. I still had an old Bosch laser level tucked away, a pricey model, discontinued, but easily recognizable to anyone who knew tools. It had a hairline crack across the lens housing, barely noticeable but perfect for identification. I dusted it off, wiped the fingerprints, and placed it in a deep bottom drawer of my old wooden tool cabinet out back. The drawer had a small magnet latch, quiet, easy to open, just enough to feel like a careless homeowner's hiding spot. Then I mounted a pinhole camera above the eaves, tucked behind the hanging ivy. The other camera, a motion-triggered trail cam, I placed inside the cabinet itself, embedded in the wall panel. Battery-operated, Wi-Fi free, off-grid. No chance of remote disable. I left the gate accidentally unlatched. Then I waited. For 6 days, nothing happened. I carried on as usual, working jobs, mowing the lawn, waving to neighbors. Karen, as always, made her rounds like royalty inspecting peasants. On day 4, she actually had the nerve to post in the HOA chat again, this time complaining about unsightly storage behind my garage. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and changed nothing. On the 7th night, the trap snapped shut. It was around 2:30 in the morning when the trail cam pinged, its infrared sensor silently triggered. I checked the footage the next morning with my heart hammering. The first few seconds showed nothing but shadows shifting in the moonlight. Then, movement. A figure slipped through the gate like a ghost. Slim build, hoodie, gloves. No flashlight. The camera picked up enough detail in night vision. She crouched beside the drawer, opened it, looked both ways, and took the level. Slid it into her tote bag, closed the drawer, and vanished back the way she came. I zoomed in on a still frame, and there it was, a glint of blonde hair under the hood, and the faint embroidered HOA logo on her jacket sleeve. Custom windbreakers. She'd handed them out 2 years ago during the Keep the Street Clean campaign. Only board members had them. I saved the footage, clipped stills, backed up copies on 3 drives, and uploaded one to a cloud account under a fake name. Then I waited again. 3 days later, I found the Bosch level listed on Facebook Marketplace. This time, the account name was Martha J. Tools. Same location radius as the last one. Description read, gently used laser level, vintage Bosch, rare model. The main image was obviously cropped, poorly. But in the upper left corner, if you looked closely, you could see part of my backyard's fence, the distinctive white pickets with the warped slat where I once backed my truck in too far. She hadn't even changed the background. It was amateur hour from someone who thought she was playing chess. I stared at the screen, letting the fury settle into something colder. Karen had keys. Karen had a pattern. Karen had just walked into my yard like it was her own, and walked off with a tool she planned to flip for $50. And now I had her, caught clean on video, matched with a listing traceable to a burner account that even a half-interested detective could rip open in 20 minutes. It wasn't about the tools anymore. It was about the fact that she felt untouchable, that she had spent months parading around as queen of the block while quietly robbing the people who trusted her with their homes and community. I wasn't going to shout. I was going to build. The more I stared at the footage, the more my mind began connecting dots I hadn't noticed before. This wasn't some impulsive theft by a desperate woman. This was organized, practiced, and most disturbingly, confident. Karen didn't act like someone sneaking around. She moved like someone doing routine work, like a garbage collector on schedule. That realization changed everything for me. I decided it was time to widen the net. I started by casually talking to a few neighbors. Nothing dramatic, no accusations, just conversations. Hey, did you ever find that pressure washer? Or, remember when your smoker disappeared last fall? To my surprise, people opened up quickly. One by one, they shared little stories that sounded too familiar. Missing hedge trimmers, extension cords, patio heaters. Most had written it off as carelessness or thought their kids had moved the stuff. Some even blamed delivery drivers or imagined backyard prowlers. But every case, every single one, came from our side of the neighborhood. So I asked them, did you ever report it? Most hadn't. The few who had. They said Karen advised them against it. Don't clog up the police system with minor complaints, she'd told one couple. We'll handle it internally. I'll bring it up with the board. One guy said Karen even offered to help him file an insurance claim, then never followed up. Another neighbor, Elaine, remembered Karen knocking on her door with a clipboard the same day her grill vanished, claiming she was performing visual compliance checks. At the time, she thought it was a coincidence. It wasn't. I started building a spreadsheet. Names, items, approximate values, dates, even brands if they could remember. Some people had photos, old Facebook posts, receipts, warranties. One woman sent me a photo of a vintage patio table that had vanished last summer. A week later, I found it on Craigslist, listed under yet another seller alias, Outdoors for You. Same scratches, same chipped edge. I pulled up all the listings I could find under that name and cross-referenced them against the spreadsheet. 27 matches. That's when I called Hank again. We sat in my garage for over 2 hours that night, sifting through everything. I showed him the footage, the cropped listing photos, the spreadsheet, the metadata, the email addresses behind the burner accounts. Most of them were registered under throwaway domains, but 2 had password reset pages tied to an old HOA Gmail address, one used exclusively by board members, including Karen. She's sloppy, Hank muttered, shaking his head. She's been getting away with it too long. Got cocky. I want to nail her to the wall, I said. Hank nodded. Then you need to stop thinking like a neighbor and start thinking like a prosecutor. Build the case tight. No guesswork. No missing links. We divided the work. He'd handle the data trace, try to tie the burner accounts to IPs, link the accounts to payment methods. I'd reach out to more neighbors, collect statements, and quietly see if anyone had screenshots or messages from Karen that hinted she knew about items before they were even reported missing. It worked faster than I expected. One neighbor forwarded me an old email from Karen offering to assist with disposal of a broken shop vacuum, except the vacuum had never been broken, just left outside overnight. The neighbor found it missing the next morning. Another sent me a Facebook message where Karen had asked cryptically if they were still using that folding bike on the porch, because those things can attract the wrong kind of attention. The bike disappeared 2 days later. We weren't just looking at opportunistic theft, we were looking at premeditated scouting. And the worst part? She'd used her authority, her access, her position, and the blind trust of the neighborhood as a weapon. By the end of the week, we had over 30 separate incidents, most with time frames, item descriptions, estimated value, and in some cases, supporting evidence like matching listings, cropped images, and platform metadata. We had a pattern, a motive, a method. Now we just needed to bring it to someone who could make it count. It's funny how quickly a neighborhood chat can go from potluck recipes to a digital battlefield. All it took was one post, one carefully crafted message that didn't name names, didn't make accusations, just asked questions. I wrote it late Thursday night and scheduled it to post the next morning in the HOA group chat. It read, "Curious if anyone else has noticed a pattern in recent property losses. Over 30 households on the west end of the neighborhood have reported missing tools, grills, and yard equipment in the past 8 months. Some of those items have been seen for sale online. If you've experienced anything similar, please message me directly. I'm compiling information to share with local law enforcement." I hit post and waited. By the time I finished my second cup of coffee, the thread had exploded. A dozen neighbors chimed in immediately. A few were cautious, asking for clarification. Others were outright pissed, not at me, but at the fact they'd been silently targeted while thinking they were alone. People started tagging each other, forwarding screenshots, offering testimonies. One guy even dug up an old Nest doorbell clip of a woman in a hoodie walking out of his side yard, carrying what he now realized had been his hedge trimmer. And then Karen showed up. Her first comment was polite. "Let's be careful with public accusations. We don't want to start a witch hunt." Within minutes, she followed with another post warning that inflammatory and potentially defamatory posts would not be tolerated under HOA bylaws. She mentioned legal consequences twice. Classic Karen. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because someone else did. Joel, the guy whose grill had vanished last fall, dropped a grainy Craigslist screenshot of what looked like his exact grill. "This was posted 3 days after mine went missing," he wrote. "Seller met me in a Wendy's parking lot. Blonde lady in sunglasses." Another neighbor chimed in. "She met me at Safeway, selling a lawnmower I swear was mine. I didn't recognize her then, but now." Then, like a lightning bolt, someone posted an image I hadn't expected. A Facebook Marketplace screenshot from earlier that month, one of the fake listings we'd already identified, except this version hadn't been cropped. In the background of the photo, clear as day, was the side of my house. The lattice panel I'd patched last spring. The same potted cactus Karen once complained looked inappropriate for the aesthetic of the neighborhood. People started connecting dots out loud in the thread. "Wait, isn't that Mark's house? Isn't that the HOA equipment shed? Why are all these sales being traced to the same car?" Someone, I still don't know who, dropped a redacted version of the footage I had. Just the clip of the figure taking the level. No face, no sound, no identifying marks, but enough to stir up suspicion. Karen lost it. She fired off a wall of text, threats of legal action, claims of doctored evidence, accusations of cyberbullying. She ended with, "I have served this community with dignity and transparency for over 10 years. This slander will not stand." 5 minutes later, she deleted the entire thread. But the damage was done. That afternoon, I drove down to the sheriff's office and met with Deputy Linetti, the investigator assigned to the case. I handed him 2 USB drives, one with the footage, metadata, screenshots, and neighbor testimonials, and one with the full spreadsheet Hank and I had been updating daily. He flipped through the folder silently, nodding as he read. When I told him we believed some of the burner accounts were linked to HOA infrastructure, his eyebrows lifted. "You think the HOA president's been robbing the block and selling the loot online?" he asked flatly. I didn't smile. "No, I know it," He nodded slowly. All right, you let me handle it from here. Back home, I checked the HOA site. Karen had posted an emergency bulletin. Due to recent misinformation campaigns and digital sabotage, HOA enforcement procedures will be paused pending a formal board meeting. And then, not 30 minutes later, she was on my doorstep. Hair perfectly blow-dried, lips tight with restraint, clipboard tucked under one arm like a shield. "Mark," she said, smiling through her teeth. "May I come in?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "We need to talk. These rumors you're spreading." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "They're not rumors, Karen." She dropped the smile. "You have no idea what you're messing with." "You're right," I said. "But the police do." For a long moment, she stood frozen. Then, without another word, she turned and walked briskly to her car. I watched her pull away, thinking, you should have just left the damn grill alone. It didn't take long after my conversation with Deputy Linetti. By Monday morning, word had already started spreading that police were asking questions. Karen's car wasn't parked in its usual HOA spot. The neighborhood felt different, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air goes thick and birds vanish. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. It did. At exactly 10:42 a.m., 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled into the neighborhood. Slow, deliberate, not sneaky. No sirens, no drama, just calm inevitability. They parked right outside Karen's beige 2-story. One officer approached the door while the other popped the trunk and started pulling out evidence bags. A third car arrived 5 minutes later, unmarked, with a man in a suit and mirrored sunglasses. This wasn't a wellness check. This was a warrant. By noon, they were wheeling out boxes. Dozens of them, one after another, plastic tubs, taped cardboard, even an old filing cabinet wrapped in chains. A few neighbors had gathered across the street, trying to act casual, but failing miserably. I saw Joel whisper something to his wife and point at one of the tubs. A faded Weber logo peeked out from under the lid. They pulled down everything: attic, garage, basement. Karen came out only once, flanked by 2 officers, arms crossed and face stone still. She didn't look at anyone, didn't say a word. She got into the back of the cruiser like someone heading to a dentist appointment, not federal holding. No cuffs. Not yet, but she wasn't driving away either. Hank called me 15 minutes later. "They found a storage spreadsheet," he said, low-voiced. "Full inventory list, model numbers, resale prices, delivery logs, some entries marked with addresses. Yours is on there 3 times. "You're kidding." "Wish I were. There's also a drawer with burner phones, at least 5. Later that day, Deputy Linetti called to confirm. They'd found dozens of stolen items, each marked with identifying codes, some with stickers from original packaging, others etched or labeled. Items matched descriptions in at least 27 of the complaints we'd submitted. Everything from power tools to garden statues. One officer even found a handwritten note. "Check porch on 438 Elm. Saw generator last week." That generator had been reported missing in June. It got darker. Some of the things weren't even hers to sell. They were items temporarily removed from properties for safety inspection under HOA authority. Karen had volunteered to secure them until homeowners came into compliance. No one had noticed. No one had questioned it. Why would they? She had the logo jacket and the clipboard. She had the HOA stamp. And she had the keys. That evening, news trucks rolled into the neighborhood. Someone had tipped off the local station. Channel 7 aired a breaking story at 6 o'clock. HOA president accused of systematic theft and online resale scheme. Investigators estimate nearly $1 million in stolen property. They showed grainy clips of the boxes, blurred out some addresses, but the implication was clear. Karen wasn't just corrupt. She was a walking garage sale with a god complex. I poured myself a drink and watched the footage of her house as officers carried out a bronze mailbox, the exact same one that had been stolen from Elaine's yard last October. I'd helped her install it myself. Later that night, the HOA chat was on fire, everyone demanding emergency elections, some calling for a full shutdown. Others just wanted to know if their missing bicycles, tools, and porch furniture would be returned. One guy wrote, "I just want my goddamn leaf blower back." I couldn't blame him. Around 10:30, I got a knock on the door. It was Deputy Linetti, this time with paperwork. "Figured you'd want to see it," he said. He handed me a copy of the official itemized list. The property recovered from Karen's home. 4 of my things were there: the inverter, the grill, the laser level, and a set of torque wrenches I hadn't even realized were gone yet. They also found a few things registered under your name in an off-site storage unit she'd been renting. We'll keep you posted. Off-site? Yeah, rented under a fake name, but it's hers. Credit card ties back. We've got surveillance too. I thanked him and shut the door, gripping the paper like it might melt. She had a second stash. She had a goddamn warehouse. The next few days were a strange blur of vindication and bureaucratic sludge. Karen had been formally charged: theft, wire fraud, unlawful access to private property, misuse of administrative authority. 13 counts in total, not including civil violations. The number was growing by the hour as more neighbors came forward, some with receipts, others with doorbell footage they'd never bothered reviewing before. It was like half the community had suddenly woken from a collective coma. Meanwhile, the HOA board went into full meltdown mode. 3 of the remaining 4 board members resigned within 48 hours. The last one, Greg, tried to maintain some semblance of authority by declaring an emergency session. It ended when someone pointed out he was the guy who'd signed off on the motion that gave Karen access to HOA enforcement keys. He logged out of the Zoom call mid-sentence. That weekend, I was invited to an impromptu town meeting. Unofficial, of course, since there technically was no longer a functioning HOA board. Over 50 people showed up, folding chairs arranged in Elaine's backyard, with someone grilling hot dogs like it was the 4th of July. There were speeches, applause, angry rants. One guy brought laminated screenshots of Karen's burner listings and taped them to a whiteboard under the heading Exhibit A. It would have been funny if it weren't so surreal. The consensus was clear. Everyone wanted their stuff back, wanted compensation, and, most of all, wanted Karen buried under a legal avalanche. That's where Hank stepped in. He'd been quietly putting together a class action suit. With all the neighbor testimonies, photos, videos, transaction logs, and the massive stash of stolen property now in police custody, we had the backbone of a serious case. He'd already spoken to a few civil attorneys, one of whom practically jumped through the phone at the opportunity. Misappropriation of community trust, conversion of property, defamation via retaliatory fines. This isn't just a case, it's a career maker, she said. I signed on. So did Joel, and Elaine, and 27 others by the end of the weekend. By Monday, the court had received the preliminary suit filing, Stanford vs. Residents of Willow Glen, with an attached evidentiary bundle thicker than a phone book. Karen had already secured legal counsel, some real estate defense shark from Boulder, but from what we'd heard, the guy wasn't thrilled about representing someone whose home had become a regional evidence depot. The cherry on top, the insurance companies. Turns out multiple residents had filed theft claims over the past year, most of which had been paid out. Now, with the thief identified, the insurers wanted their money back. And they weren't coming after the victims. They were coming after Karen. One adjuster called her the dumbest organized thief of the decade during a recorded deposition leak. She went from queen of the block to walking liability. At the sheriff's station, Linetti told me the final inventory of stolen goods was now valued at just under $980,000. That included tools, furniture, yard equipment, electronics, bikes, even a marble fireplace Karen had personally supervised the removal of during a safety code review. She claimed it was improperly installed and a fire hazard. It had sold for $3,000 online. Cash. No receipt. She was running a miniature Home Depot out of her house, Linetti said. And the warehouse unit? More of the same. And yet, despite all this, Karen was out on bail. $10,000. That's all it took to send her back home. Albeit under house arrest with a shiny new ankle monitor. She couldn't leave the property, couldn't access HOA systems, couldn't contact any residents, but she was still there, still in the neighborhood. The board was gutted, the HOA office was closed, and Karen sat in her house like a smug little ghost, shades drawn, lights off, pretending the world hadn't collapsed around her. So I put up a sign at the edge of my driveway. Private property. Not for sale, Karen. The next morning, someone spray-painted a matching sign across her garage door. 6 months later, the neighborhood didn't just feel different. It was different. The HOA was gone, dissolved under county supervision after the civil suit exposed its complete failure of governance. In its place stood a newly formed residents association, this time run by a temporary committee made up of volunteers, most of them people Karen used to fine for mailbox height violations or unsanctioned wind chimes. My mailbox, now a work of rebellious art. I'd carved HOA free zone into the side with a soldering pin and stuck a fake security camera on top. Elaine had started a community garden where the old HOA office used to be. Joel ran Saturday power tool workshops, mostly just an excuse to share beers and stories about the dark days. As for Karen, she didn't make it to trial in the way she probably imagined. After a series of damning depositions, her attorney dropped her case, citing irreconcilable ethical concerns. The prosecution was airtight: surveillance footage, witness statements, online sales records tied to IP addresses and payment accounts, a physical inventory with owner-identifying marks, and perhaps most embarrassingly, a group of middle-aged suburbanites with laminated exhibits and PowerPoint presentations. It was like Law & Order Neighborhood Unit. She was found guilty on all counts. The court sentenced her to 13 years in state prison with no chance of early parole for the first 8. Her assets, including the house, the car, the warehouse storage unit, and multiple HOA retirement accounts, were seized for restitution. The money went to repay the insurers, fund the Residents Association startup, and compensate everyone listed in the civil suit. When the verdict was read, I was there, sitting 2 rows behind her empty defense table. Karen didn't turn around once. She never spoke, not even when the judge described her actions as a gross abuse of community trust. Afterward, I walked outside and stood in the courthouse parking lot, unsure of what to do. Closure's a funny thing. It doesn't always feel like a victory parade. Sometimes it's just a long exhale after a year of holding your breath. A week later, the neighborhood threw a barbecue. Someone brought custom t-shirts that read, "I got robbed by Karen and all I got was this lawsuit and my lawn chair back." It wasn't elegant, but it was cathartic. We ate burgers, drank beer, and laughed too loud, too long. For once, no one complained. That night, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I walked back to my house and past the old fence line Karen used to slip through. It was sealed now, reinforced, double-locked, and lined with motion lights. I glanced at the camera above my workshop, still running, still watching, and on my porch, nailed into a fresh board of cedar, hung the sign, "Private property. No Karens allowed."